Hello everyone, just a quick word from your friendly editor/husband. For all of you who listen to So I'm Watching This Show and own an Android device, do me a favor. Go to the Google Play Store and download the Podcast Republic app. It's a fantastic app that allows you to get all of your favorite podcasts directly on your Android devices. I use the app and love it. I can search for the podcasts I want to listen to, select them as favorites, and have them all just a click away. Make sure you set So I'm Watching the Show as a favorite so you don't miss any new episodes. Again, the app is Podcast Republic, available on your Android device. Thanks!
The world is changed. I feel it in the water. I feel it in the earth. I smell it in the air. Much that once was is lost, for none now live who remember it.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I am Will.
And I'm Kristin.
And this is So I'm Watching This Show. On today's episode, we are going to have a conversation about The Lord of the Rings.
Yay!
You're excited.
I'm so excited.
You're so excited.
I love The Lord of the Rings.
I do too. Certainly in concept. Less so in execution and practice. And
I mean, that's fair.
That's a personal thing. That's not an assessment of the art. But yeah. So where do you want to start? Do you want to start at the beginning?
Sure.
What was your introduction to Lord of the Rings?
When I was in, I want to say middle school, but maybe very early high school, my mom gave me the books. And I was like, yeah, right, Mom. Like, I'm going to ever read this. This is for dorks.
No chicks dig nerds, especially nerds that are into Lord of the Rings.
Chicks dig Lord of the Rings, Randall.
Yeah, kind of chicks that are into swords and elves and shit, and I wouldn't fuck them with the Torch of Gondor.
And so I didn't read it. And then I think the first one came out in 2001. Yeah, 1, 2, 3. So the first one came out in 2001. So I was just turned 16 and we had a family Christmas that year. And we were all trying to figure out a movie that the whole family could see.
Even before that, we were in school together.
Yeah.
And I remember you being very grumpy about that trailer that was released.
Why?
It's a very vivid. You were complaining about how it was lame. And you were like, it's just a bunch of dudes walking over a mountain. And you're like, who gives a fuck about that?
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Those fucking Hobbit movies were boring as hell. All it was a bunch of people walking. 3 movies of people walking to a fucking volcano.
And so I have such a strong memory of you being like, that's dork shit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, cut to me.
Well, and to be honest, they were making a fat amount of hype over a teaser of a bunch of dudes walking over the crest of a mountain.
Correct.
So.
Yes. Okay, so I do remember that now. I did not remember that before you said it, but now I do remember feeling that way. So when my Aunt Megan suggested that we all go see the first Lord of the Rings movie, I was like, whatever, we'll just go. It's whatever. And I won't lie, we were like 90 seconds into the movie, and I was like, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life.
That opening is so good.
One by one, the free lands of Middle-earth fell to the power of the ring. But there were some who resisted. A last alliance of men and elves marched against the armies of Mordor, and on the slopes of Mount Doom, they fought for the freedom of Middle-earth.
Yeah, I loved it immediately. I was head over heels for Orlando Bloom and Viggo Mortensen at the time. I was just like all in on both of them. It was such a good time. We all had such a good time. It was also so well done, and it was really interesting. And having gone in fresh, because like I said, I did not read the books, it was so fascinating watching this happen on screen. And I want to say this is like maybe one of the first movies that I then followed and like learned stuff about the production after the fact, like in between the other two, because I was so fascinated in how they did it all and everything like that. So yeah, that's my first introduction. And then after that, we used to only have family Christmases every other year. So I saw the Two Towers, I think, by myself. And then we as a family went to go see, I went and saw Return of the King with my college roommates because I forced them to go with me because nobody wanted to go with me. And so I forced them to sit down and watch the first two with me and then go to the third one. And I don't think they enjoyed it as much as I did.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It is a lot. It's a way lot. I totally understand how much it is, but it's great.
So I had a concept of what Lord of the Rings was for a long time. I mean, growing up as kind of like the geeky fantasy kid, I was like, I had an action figure of Galadriel before the movies, like an imagined version of her.
Sure.
Long before I knew who she was. I just thought it was pretty. And I was like, that's interesting. But outside of her, all I really knew about it was that it was like a whole bunch of like dudes and like funny looking guys. And there was a ring and a quest, and it seemed boring. Like, I think I got maybe 10 minutes into one of the animated versions, and I was just like, I couldn't be less entertained. Like,
Sure.
It's one of the things that I find interesting about genre and stuff, because it's like growing up as a kid who liked fantasy and really thrives off of fantasy and eats and breathes and lives fantasy, I don't like a lot of the fantasy that is available. It just doesn't suit my sensibilities.
Yeah, it's because it's for dudes.
Do you think that that's boiled down?
It's because it's like adventure stories for dudes, and it's like a different kind of dude than you are, and it's not appealing to everybody.
Yeah, because I always wanted a more like high fashion fantasy, and that just doesn't, it's so rarely existed. And I think that's one of the reasons why I clung to like the Star Wars prequels and stuff, even though the movies themselves were mediocre at best. It's like there was just something, or even like the fantasy movies I ended up liking was like that movie Warriors of Virtue, because I got so much mileage out of Marley Shelton and her 3 different outfits. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
no,
it's like,
I totally agree. But the problem with so much high fantasy is that it's a
lot of quests.
It's a lot of quests, which honestly, there's nothing wrong with the quest, but it's a lot of quests like trudging through the wilderness, and it's not so much like court intrigue, which is what's interesting to you and I. And I don't know why Lord of the Rings hit me so as hard as it did at the time, because it is the former. There's not a lot of court intrigue. It just is a lot of, dirty men trudging through the woods. But it is, I don't know, very interesting. I think the performances are good. I think the story is good. I think it's
outright biblical, and I
also,
think that,
yes, yeah, very good versus evil.
Yeah, when you're raised in a Western society, it's like whether or not you're religious, that stuff is sort of ingrained in the societal fabrics. And so I think when you're watching it, there's something about it that feels so pressing and feels so real.
Yeah.
And, it's like even people like Jen loves Lord of the Rings, and Jen can't be bothered with so many things, but she's like all about the Lord of the Rings movies. It's the weirdest thing in the world. And it really has earned its place. Like, when was it written? Was it the 40s?
37.
Okay.
Oh, wait, no. The Hobbit was 1937. So, yeah, the 40s.
So, over time, it really sort of earned its...
Oh, no, 54. Sorry, 54.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the Hobbit or the Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings, 54,
okay.
54, and 55.
Okay. So it really sort of like earned its place like over time. It wasn't, not that this is a bad thing. I was going to say it wasn't like the hot new thing that just sort of came out of nowhere. And that's not a bad thing, because that's what Harry Potter was. And I would consider that the most immediate comparison.
Yeah, for sure.
Because remember, I even had that kind of issue with Harry Potter at first, where I was just not all that into it because there wasn't really a glamour factor until they started getting older. And then I was like, okay. But the Interfleur Delacour, and I was like, okay, I can find something in here.
I'm fine now.
Yeah, so I remember them announcing the movie, because at this time I had a subscription to Entertainment Weekly, and I remember it being big because it was regarded as unfilmable. Like, it was regarded as just beyond the scope of what we could accomplish. And so, and it's so strange in hindsight to think about, because we watch this, I mean, I'm jumping around a little bit, but we watch this every year. We watch this in November every year.
Mm-hmm.
And it holds up
It
so
really
well,
does. Yeah.
considering it came out in such a dubious time.
Okay, so it really did. And I think part of it is because there's a couple of things, because there are a handful of shots where you can tell it's on a green screen because they had to deal with like the sunlight or whatever. Yeah. But it holds up so well. And I think it's because so much care was taken. Like Peter Jackson really gave a shit, and so much of it is actually practical and in the real location. And they spent such a long time filming, and then they spent even longer in post-production, that I just feel like it like almost couldn't fail. And it was all Peter Jackson's effects company.
It was a huge gamble because they filmed it all together. So I think that's the one reason why it succeeded in any capacity.
Yeah.
Because if they filmed it the way traditional movie franchises are filmed, where one at a time, this would have easily cost double what it cost.
Well, I think it would have cost double. It also would have taken twice as long to come out, because you know that, I mean, it happened. Like, Orlando Bloom and Viggo Mortensen got famous after this, and they would have not been available because they would have gotten all those other things, and they would have started looking different in between, and the wigs would have been worse, and like all kinds of shit. So I agree with you. I totally agree that it was like the absolute best way they could have made this happen.
As it is, each movie comes out at around like 98 million per movie. And that's so little considering what we're looking at, like what is on the screen.
Scope? Yeah.
Yeah. It was like 350 million for all of them, which was gargantuan now and at the time. But it like breaks down in such a weird way because they were able to budget it stuff. And it's like Cate Blanchett filmed all of her material for all 3 movies in a 2-week span. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, is he used so many local actors, and then then on top of that,
stars.
yeah, and made them stars. And then on top of that, he used so many actors who were nobody. Where like it's Elijah Wood, Sean Astin, and then it's Ian McKellen and Cate Blanchett and Christopher Lee, and that's kind of like it for famous people in this movie in the year 2000. It's bananas.
I mean, Liv Tyler was like a music video model, and then in a Michael Bay movie, like
yeah. I mean, I guess that had come out. Yeah, and Empire Records, but she was like
prior,
nobody.
Yeah,
exactly.
Ultimately, the gamble was, would people care, and would people care enough for it to make money? And in hindsight, it's hard to imagine any other reality, but I guess before, because high fantasy wasn't a thing at this point. Fantasy kind of had a death in like the 80s, and it was regarded as children's stuff. And excuse me, there were several things in a row that we've talked about over, our tenure doing this podcast, but it's like, there was X-Men, there was Moulin Rouge, and so it was like several genres around the exact same time kind of roared back to life.
Yeah.
And all of them were very successful, and I think it really was like a jolt to the industry. And I think the timing, and Harry Potter, frankly, I mean, the timing of all of it, I think really sort of, it changed the entire industry, because from here on, the industry is built around these genres. you know?
Definitely. I couldn't agree more.
So it was fascinating. I remember being lukewarm on it, because again, there weren't really a lot of female characters. There's 3. There's quite literally 3. And of the 3, they padded Arwen's role a great deal. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, I'll give this a shot. And I remember going, and I remember being just enraptured from the beginning, because that opening scene about the rings.
Voiceover with Cate Blanchett. Oh my God. Yeah. It's breathtaking. And I can't stress enough that I think it's because everybody gave a shit. Like, everybody really gave a shit about it being good. Like, that you can tell they're taking it seriously, but you can tell they're having fun, and you can tell that they give a shit about getting it right. And I think that's what's so important.
I mean, I laughed when you said that because I was like, duh. But I mean, as I was thinking, I was like, yeah, no,
often,
really.
Yeah.
It's not a paycheck for anybody.
Right,
Because remember, there's the famous story where they offered Gandalf to Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And he found the script incomprehensible.
So he signed up instead for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which is so much more incomprehensible than
this. It's incomprehensible in a different way.
Well, sure.
But I know this is a question that divides people, across the land. But I think The Fellowship of the Ring is such a perfect movie. And I kind of think you can also just end there. Like, if it's not your, if it's not your thing, you can watch that movie and be like, I get the gist. I understand what it is. Yeah. And your favorite is
The Two
Towers.
Yeah.
And a lot of people's favorite is Return of the King. And it's like, there's a lot of fan service. It's not really fan service, but there's a lot of resolution in Return of the Kings. That's how the ends work.
It's not that I don't like Return of the King, but okay. When I was watching the first two this morning, I was watching Two Towers, and I finished Two Towers, and I was like, wow, it's weird watching this again now that I like Miranda Otto.
I was wondering.
Sabrina.
I was really wondering.
Where, I think Éowyn is still such a fucking drip. But I like Miranda Otto, so I'm having a hard time being as mad as I used to be, and that's what I hated so much about the third one, is I was like, who does this bitch think she is? Unbelievable. And I would get so mad, and I just didn't like her attitude with Aragorn, and I just was not into it at all.
I just found her to be so unappealing.
Yeah, she's very unappealing.
And I couldn't fathom the reality where you were faced with her and Liv Tyler, and it's like,
what a tough choice.
Yeah, I don't know. There was something beyond just looking at them, but it's like Liv Tyler is like an elven princess. It's like, in what reality is this even a question? And we both hated her.
And that's the thing is, it's not a question for anyone except for her. Like at no point
even Aragorn's pretty much like.
At no point is Aragorn ever like, wow, I'm not sure who I'll choose. It's like, no, he's got her life force necklace or whatever, and he's like, you're a very nice shield maiden, please leave me alone, and your soup is horrible.
We talk about it every year when we watch it, and I didn't realize that it was such a thing, because it was 4 or 5 years ago. We got maybe halfway into the movie before I made a comment about her being ugly, and Tim was like, man, he was like, that's the longest we've ever gotten to this movie before you guys started hounding on her. And so, sorry, but and it's like, I've laid off it now. And also, you're right, we like her from Sabrina, but I think she's not miscast in the sense that she's not capable of doing the role. She's not who I would have picked. And especially knowing that they had originally cast Uma Thurman, it's so difficult for me.
I agree with that for sure. Uma Thurman would have been better. And I think the biggest problem for me isn't even that because I don't necessarily think she's miscast. I think she was misdirected a couple of times, and it makes her more unappealing because it feels like she's got a chip on her shoulder that it's not fun to watch or experience.
It's a trope that is well explored, and it's not fun.
Yeah.
The female character with the chip on her shoulder and the male. Yeah, so yeah, we went right there. I was still talking about Fellowship of the Rings, but I remember sitting in the theater and I think I saw it twice. I know I saw it twice, but I have memories from both ones, and I don't remember which, but I remember being just completely awoken by Orlando Bloom.
Yep.
There was a stirring.
Yeah, me too. I was like, who is this piece? And I looked him up when I was back on the internet or whatever after we saw that. And I realized that he didn't have blonde hair, and I was betrayed.
Yeah, because he had a black mohawk, and it was what? And our beef with so many wigs, and it's this movie apparently has decent wigs because we've never complained about them. But
these wigs are incredible, which I mean, we're not going to get into the travesty that is the Hobbit movies, but like these wigs are great in a way that the Hobbit wigs, I was like, how do you not have more money, Peter Jackson? Why did you spend it all on making Orlando Bloom look younger, even though he doesn't need it?
Well, it's also probably the frame rate stuff. I've been meaning to watch it. There's a YouTube either video or series charting why exactly the movies are terrible, and it's apparently fascinating.
Hobbit, yeah. Wow, I would watch that.
Because Glenn Weldon recommended it one week on Pop Culture Happy Hour. But no. So, yeah, I remember that. I remember loving Arwen's whole thing with the purple dress and the sword and like the ocean or the river rather. And yeah, there's actually, I do honestly think The Fellowship is my favorite one. There's so many iconic things from it.
I agree. And to the point, to bring this back around to the beginning when I was apparently making fun of it in high school, I remember very vividly that scene in like from the movie when they are cresting the hill and they're all walking. It's like the teaser where they're all walking through that small pass over the top of the mountain. And when I watched it today, I was like, man, is that like one of the most iconic moments in movie history, like ever. And it's just, I agree. I mean, at the time, what can I say? I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know what it was going to be. I just was like,
and there was a lot of hype for that.
Exactly. I was like, whatever, a bunch of dudes, who gives a shit? And then, but, you know, having it in context means a great deal.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, I guess we're going to start this part of our conversation. But what is this about?
Okay.
I can explain further. I obviously have watched this movie and these series probably 30 times.
Right.
I definitely followed it my first viewing, but in subsequent viewings, I really only watch the scenes that I like.
Okay.
And I just take all of my cues from like the music. It's like I can tell when bad things are happening. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So I don't know that I could accurately explain. Like I can tell you. Well, yeah. So what is this about?
Okay, so there are a bunch of rings. And
19.
Huh?
19?
Ish. I don't know.
Okay.
Sure.
I watched a video about the Silmarillion, and I can actually explain that a little bit.
Oh, okay.
But
I've not experienced any of the Silmarillion. I would have nothing to talk about with Stephen Colbert if we ever met.
Well, there's angels.
Oh, neat. Okay.
Yeah, it gets, because technically the wizards, the like 5 wizards, are a form of like low-level angel. They're not meant. That's how he can fight the Balrog. They're like the same level power-wise.
Interesting. Okay.
So yeah, I know some stuff.
All right. So there are a bunch of rings, and some were given to dwarves, and some were given to elves, and some were given to men. But there was one more ring that was even more powerful, but it was made with like ill intent, and that was Sauron's ring, the one ring to rule them all.
One ring to rule them all.
One ring to find them.
Oh, Jesus.
Men ended up taking it, and it ended up corrupting the men. And so then, and this is all the Galadriel voiceover from the beginning. And so then it like fell into the river, and it was lost for like millennia until Smeagol and his friend from the beginning of Return of the King find it, and Smeagol kills his friend to have it. And then Smeagol has it for a really long time, and then Bilbo finds it during The Hobbit. And then Bilbo has it until he goes away on his 111st birthday.
Today is my 111th birthday!
To Rivendell, and he leaves it to Frodo. But the whole time, Gandalf didn't actually know it was there or what it was. But once he does, he comes back to Frodo and tells Frodo it has to be destroyed, so take it to Bree and I will meet you there. Well, obviously, Sauron captures Gandalf, and so he can't meet them there. So they end up going with Aragorn part of the rest of the way, and they make it to Rivendell, and that's where they form the Fellowship. And then the Fellowship takes it until they have that fight at the end of the first one, and then Frodo and Sam go off on their own. And the whole time, the only point of the movie is to destroy the ring in the fires of Mount Doom. That is the only true objective, but other things go on along the way, obviously, where in the second one, Aragorn and Gimli and Legolas are on their own little quest, and then Merry and Pippin are with Treebeard. And so everybody is like sort of doing their own thing, and then they all like hook up again, except for Frodo and Sam. All of them hook up again in the beginning-ish of the third one. They're at least like in bigger clumps at that point.
Man, so Frodo and Sam really just are on their own for like the bulk of all of this. Wow.
Well, they are with Gollum for most of the time.
Yeah.
But they are trying to get they are trying to get into Mordor so they can get up to Mount Doom and throw it in the lava, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that is basically the end of it, except for they also have to kill the Witch King, which is what Éowyn does.
That's the way it is in the book too, right?
I think so. I did subsequently read these, but now I want to say it's been like 7 or 8 years.
Because that feels...
So I don't remember a lot.
That feels very ahead of its time, very progressive. The whole,
think
like, no man can kill me.
Yeah, I think he was kind of progressive.
I knew, considering how few female presences there are, I remember reading an article back when it came out that the amount of reverence he gives to each one was like, the fact that Galadriel is like the most powerful.
Mm-hmm. He also was like best friends with C.S. Lewis, who was a deeply devout Christian, and Tolkien was like famously an atheist, and they like apparently had tons of really fun talks, which I would have loved to be party to.
Well, that's very interesting because, like I said, I did some reading. I watched some YouTube videos about the Silmarillion.
Those are the same.
I was reading the other day. I'm just gonna start telling people I've read the Silmarillion. I had some dude narrate it to me in 5-minute chunks with animation.
Nice.
Yeah, there's like a god. It's very god, like angels and demons. There's a god, and God help me trying to say these words, but beautiful language, but it's all vowels.
But it's all vowels, and when it's not vowels, it's like the hardest consonant.
Eru, Iluvatar is his name. He's the god. And then he created these quote-unquote angels, and then there's the Valar, which are like the highest. There's 14 or 15 of them, depending on which place you're at. And they're kind of like the Olympians, like the gods. Okay. And then there's the Merar, who are like their servants. And then under that is the Ishtari, which are the 5 wizards.
Okay.
And Eru created the world, and then they all sang together. But one of the Valar named, I don't know, Moloch, what was his name? Hold on.
I don't know.
I'm looking it up. Melkor.
Okay. I was like, why are you asking me?
He decided to sing another song, and he got like drunk on power, and it fractured the heavens. And so he's effectively the like devil figure in this world. And he comes down to the... It's actually very... I mean... It's very straightforward, like it's very biblical, very Christian, but granted, I mean, that's kind of the most base level good versus evil.
Sure.
And so he's the one who corrupts Sauron. Sauron. And there's all kinds of like fighting, and there's like hundreds, if not thousands, I think, of years. And mostly that stuff was all interesting, but the thing that I found the most helpful from watching these videos and getting this information is it broke down the other creatures, because it's like the god created, Eru created like the elves and the hobbits and the men, I think.
Okay.
And the men were his favorite, and he blessed them by giving them free will and short lives. For whatever reason, in his wisdom, that was a good thing, because the elves have like... They're not immortal, but they definitely... Are they immortal?
They're, like, immortal adjacent. They, like...
Yeah.
Well, it's also... It's one of those things where, like, the time of the elves is ending. We're going to the Undying Lands. And I'm just like, so are you going to go there and die? Or are you going to go there and live forever?
It's where the Valar live. It's, like, heaven on earth.
Okay. I always assumed that these... elves were the kind that can only die in battle or have a broken heart. And I don't know if that's real, but that's what I always assumed.
It was like one continent, but throughout the history, it got fractured into chunks. And so Middle Earth is called that because it's in the middle. And like the West is the Undying Lands. And then I forget what the East is. They didn't really get into it, but it's all very like, well, fantasy Dungeons and Dragons logic, but it did work for me, where it was like, basically the humans are the only ones that can get anything accomplished.
Okay.
Because the elves are tied to, they're like slaves to magic and nature.
Okay.
And so the rings all came from the fact that magic, they're at the end of the second age, I think, or maybe the third age. Magic is dying. It's like waning. And so Sauron was like, I can make these rings that will allow you to control the magic. And
the wizard?
elves, yeah.
Okay.
Or it might have, one of them, it might have been Sauron.
Well, Sauron is the eye. Yeah.
And Saruman is the wizard.
Yeah.
Sauron. One of them went, Sauron, I think. Yeah, he went to the elves and he was like,
okay.
I've got a recipe to make these rings that'll give you magic. And they were into that because it allowed them to keep the status quo. And they put on the rings and immediately were like, oh no, just kidding. This is awful.
Okay.
And I guess that was the 3 rings. At one point, because they were put into chunks. It was 7 for this and 5 for that and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so basically his plan backfired. And so they ended up in the hands of the people of the man, which it corrupted them the way it was supposed to. And they turned into the Witch Kings and stuff. But they were talking about how...
Well, the Witch King is a different thing from the Ring Wraiths.
Than the Ring Wraiths. That's right. I thought I had this on lock before I started talking, and then I was like...
We're going to get so many angry tweets about
really
our misinformation.
We're acknowledging we don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
I am well-versed in the movies, and that's it.
It was... I'll put a link. There was one video in particular. It just says CGP Grey, and it was a man narrating it, and it's the Lord of the Rings Mythology Explained Part 1. That's the one in particular that I found the most... most information out of. And it just sort of explained why, because of the nature of them, the elves, because they're tied to nature and magic and all that, that's why it's so difficult to get them to do anything.
Okay.
Because the humans are trying to get stuff accomplished and they're just very nah. And hobbits are between, hobbits are a type of human. They're a type of man or a subspecies of man. Mm-hmm. And so they're the perfect ring bearers because they understand the importance, but they don't have the desire.
Okay.
And so it's they're capable of containing it. And he even made a joke about Gollum, and he was like, but, make all the jokes you want. He handled it for several hundred years.
Yeah.
And it eventually got to him. And they talk about how the dwarves, it backfired real hard on the dwarves. And I forgot where the dwarves came from. Maybe that devil character made them or something. He's the one that made the dragons. And we actually don't know that orcs are corrupted elves because Tolkien died before he could finish that part of the history.
Oh, well, I was going to say, in the movie, the Uruk-hai are... Mm-hmm. They are the ones that are...
The Tolkien scholars believe that's what he was doing. That's what he was building to.
Interesting.
But it never fully was actually explained. And it's all... It actually was fascinating, and it made me... It made me recontextualize the entire trilogy and sort of put it in a perspective that I'm actually into it in a way that I didn't anticipate getting into. And I can't imagine ever sitting down and reading it because it's gibberish. It's just psychobabble.
The Silmarillion or the books?
Both. In particular, the Silmarillion.
Yeah, look, the books are good, and I think he was a great writer, and it's fine, but also it's 90% men singing poems at each other.
Yeah.
It's very men singing poems at each other.
How hard was it for you to not say queer?
No, I wasn't even thinking of saying it, but it's very homoerotic, the movies especially.
Remember when the boys made us watch that movie about the gay guys on the mountain? Lord of the Rings. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that I can't tell if it was on purpose.
I don't know. I have no idea. But yeah, so basically, long story short, too late, it kind of helped me wrap my mind around what all was happening, especially being given a map of something other than, because I've seen the map of Middle Earth, but it's to have a grasp on what the Undying Lands are. It's for whatever, I guess because the Valar live there, magic is still there.
Okay.
And it made me like the elves even more because it explained why they were so difficult.
Sure.
Like, it's just like, I don't know. And I guess the rings like worked too well on the drawer. Or like, the rings made like the dwarves care only about treasure, which they already cared too much about it.
Sure.
And so they just like hoarded more of it, which then caused do you want dragons? Because that's how you get dragons.
That's how you get dragons.
And that backfired on them. And so it's like, it just suddenly, I was like, oh, so that scene where they're in like the dwarf kingdom and it's like abandoned and stuff. I like understand why now.
Okay.
And one of the Valar, or one of them created the eagles, and like suddenly all of it kind of started making a little bit more sense to me. And,
interesting, because I just took everything on faith.
Well, it you breaking it down helps, because honestly, that is what it's about. And all the rest of it, the other 5 hours, is just like side quests.
Yeah, I mean, essentially. I mean, there are things that need to happen, obviously, but it's so... A lot of it is relatively inconsequential to the main plot, which is throw the ring in the fire.
Mm-hmm. Well, and because we watch it, we spend an entire day, like, it's a party, we decorate, we have food, friends come over. Mm-hmm. It's like, I haven't actually sat down and watched it beginning to end in, like, over a decade. So it's like, I have no concept of what scene belongs. I guess I do, because I know I usually take several naps during the day, and I'll be like, It's 4:00, it's getting to one of my favorite scenes. Like, I process it now as, like, one large whole, and... I have a hard time remembering which scene comes where and stuff. And there just are so many dudes. Like, Sean Bean is different from Carl Urban, who is different from, like...
David Wenham.
Yeah. God, yeah.
Yeah.
Also in Moulin Rouge.
Yes, he is. Oh my God. Wait, no, who is he?
Aubrey, the director with the purple wig.
Right. I mean, it is a lot of dudes, I guess, because it's going on almost 10 years or 20 years since I started watching these movies, you know? So not only have I watched a lot of these people's careers kind of explode, but also I've just seen it so many times that I know who everyone is.
Yeah, never in a million years would I have bet on Carl Urban when I was watching him as Cupid with the frosted tips and Hercules and Xena, but...
Yeah.
It is all very interesting, and it's all very, very good. And I mean, I want to come back to it and stress how well it holds up. And I meant to say this earlier. I think it's because they didn't allow the shiny new technology to corrupt them like a ring.
Yeah.
They knew when to use physical miniatures. They knew when to, like, actually shell out the dollars for, like, new... Because they created the software, the Weta software.
Yeah.
It was created that it's like industry standard. It's like entrenched in the industry now, but it like...
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, we almost don't go see a movie that hasn't passed through Weta.
It's an algorithm, or it's like a computer program that it animates itself. So all of these sweeping shots of the battles, you can tell the computer, these are Team A, these are Team B, and the computer will have them fight each other.
Sure.
And it's like... That was groundbreaking for technology.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite, like, scenes or moments or things you wanted to talk about?
Well, the reason that I like the second one so much is because I'm such a slut for the Battle of Helm's Deep.
Okay.
It's like legit my favorite. It's so good. It's like...
It's one with your elf, Craig Parker.
It is the one with my elf, Haldir the elf. Oh, man. Every time I get like, first of all, I think he's so hot, and I feel like I'm alone in that. But
I think Craig Parker is hot, but I'd have never found Haldir hot.
Yeah, I don't know. From the very first time when I saw this in the theater, I was like, who's this one? And I just, I love it. I love him. So there's a lot of things about Helm's Deep. The first of which is that it's kind of hilarious because I really like all the stuff between Gimli and Legolas. I
literally was gonna say that is another thing is the movies and the story itself it's kind of hilarious, like straightforward. There's humor in it in a way that I don't think people expect, and you do have to be paying rapt attention.
Well, sure, but I mean, it's dialogue. It's not just like it's not really just like funny
But
imagery.
it's jovial in a way that you wouldn't anticipate. And also, outside of that, we find it, certainly I find it, ironically hilarious a handful of times. Like, Gollum is hysterical to me.
Okay, I agree.
Go back
however,
to your...
I agree, however, the fact that Andy Serkis has never won an acting award of any kind is beyond me, because that performance is all him. We've all seen the footage of Andy Serkis in the mocap suit going down that icy river.
Yeah, he'll get a lifetime.
I mean, I think it's ridiculous. The reason he doesn't get them is because mocap is not recognized as an acting performance, and I think it's wrong. I think that's wrong. But okay, going back to the Battle of Helm's Deep, it's very tense, it's very funny, but it also, I love like a last stand kind of moment in movies and fiction in general, and it feels very, even though it's in the middle, it feels like a very intense last stand, because this is like, you know, the stronghold of Middle Earth at this point. It's like this, and then Minas Tirith in Gondor. Those are like the end. That's it. That's the last straw in between Mordor and the rest of the normal people. And so I just really enjoy it. And all the fighting's really good. And like Gimli and Legolas keeping track, and then Aragorn having to toss Gimli from like around the corner. It's just all very good. And then Gandalf comes in and saves them at the very last minute. I mean, it's amazing.
That is, Gandalf the White is like...
coming down that like 88-degree angle hill.
What is it, Shadowfax?
Yeah, his horse is Shadowfax.
Yeah. Oh, God, it's so good.
Run, Shadowfax. Show us the meaning of haste.
Mary!
It really is. I'm like, now I'm actually getting like revved up for 2 weeks from now.
Get hype.
So I guess if I had to pick a favorite, I have 2 favorites. 3 if you're it's the women, but 3 if you're including.
Can I guess your number 1?
Well, you can state my number 1.
Beautiful and terrible as the dawn.
It's Lothlorien. It's the whole scene.
Lothlorien scene.
Yeah, is my favorite, but in particular that like showpiece that Cate Blanchett does.
In place of a dark lord, you would have a queen, not dark but beautiful and terrible as the dawn. Treacherous as the sea, stronger than the foundations of the earth. All shall love me and despair.
Treacherous as the sea.
Stronger than the foundations of the earth. That's just like, that's a wedding toast if ever I've heard one.
It is very good.
I tell people that's what I toasted at your wedding, even though
you did not. That's definitely not.
No,
what
I did not. If like our parents weren't there, because like,
if it had just been like people our age,
yeah, your dad would have been like, I don't want you hanging out with that kid anymore.
I would have been like, it's too late, Dad. It's been 15 years.
Despair. With the costume change in the middle. No, I also feel a little bit robbed of her husband, but doesn't he also kind of just suck?
Celeborn, I guess. I was paying more attention today, and it's a hard C, apparently.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. He doesn't really do much. He's no Haldir.
No, I disagree, but yeah. So that whole scene is my favorite. And then I really love Arwen's melodrama in the middle of the Two Towers.
When Elronda's telling her that she'll just waste away. Yeah,
her whole scene, I think, because she's not in that book, and so it's like they had to really pad that, and I think it feels. I also think it's good information. You know what I mean? It's
sure.
like, and I think the tableaus like serve because he could have just said that to her. You know what I mean? And
yeah, but no, she's imagining the future where Aragorn is dead, and she is like in mourning for the rest of time, essentially.
Mm-hmm. I just love it. And I mean, it's all great. The final battle is overblown in a way where it's like too much, but you have to.
Well, there's also like three simultaneous battles, or like they take place one right after one another.
The elephants are always like too much for me. It's like, but the whole coronation scene is so good. And like, both like Aragorn and Arwen in their like dress is like, oh, because she's in that mint green.
Yeah,
like,
you're always more of a fan of it than I am, and I much prefer. I mean, it's fine. I just also prefer Aragorn dirty. So,
well, sure, but it's such a cool crown.
It's a fine crown.
It's like unique. Like it. Looks...
It's definitely unique. I'll give it that.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think it's so cool, and as much as you like Helm's Deep, I am a Minas Tirith girl. Like, I think it's so cool. Unless you lived in the house right next to the like cliff that juts out.
Sure.
And you need to get to your friend who lives in the house on the other side of the cliff.
Sure, okay.
And you have to go all the way around.
I mean, like, or if you live at the very bottom in Osgiliath and the steward of Gondor falls into your house on fire from jumping off the top of it. I mean, those are all concerns when you live in Gondor.
That has to be the strangest plot in the entire
I fucking hate the Steward of Gondor. I've never committed his name to memory because I hate him so much. He's Boromir and Faramir's dad, and he's just the worst because when Boromir dies, it's like his life is over, and he's like, I have no sons, and it's like Faramir is standing right there.
It's just so odd, and it takes up so much time.
So much time, and then he just like douses himself with oil and goes to burn on Faramir's
live
pyre.
sons. Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a real lot.
It's just very, it's yeah. So
it's very, very. Well, before we go, I did want to say we've mentioned it twice now that we have been watching this every year for a decade. And I would imagine people are curious as to why. And I don't think we've ever mentioned it on the show before. I was going to say why. And it's basically prepare for a mushy story about me and husband/editor Will. So it's pretty much 10 years ago. If you're listening to this the day it released, 10 years ago, roughly tomorrow, I was only friends with Will at the time. And we decided that we wanted to watch all 3 Lord of the Rings movies. So he came over to my house that you and I lived in together.
Mm-hmm.
And we proceeded to watch all 3 Lord of the Rings movies in a row. And it was super fun. And then at the end of it, he wouldn't leave. And I was like, I have to go to work tomorrow. And it's late. What's up? And he was like, no, I should go. And by that point, we had some James Bond on, like GoldenEye or something. He just was like not leaving. And I was like, why aren't you leaving? I was like, I have to go to bed. And he finally was like, well, I think I like you, in his very boy way of 10 years ago. And I was like, oh, okay. And so we basically started dating from then. And so then, to commemorate the day, now every year we watch Lord of the Rings the week before Thanksgiving. And 6 years ago now, he proposed on Lord of the Rings Day. And when we got married, we had the marquee at the movie theater say "One ring to rule them all" because we're big nerds.
Do you remember, because he proposed to you first thing in the morning, and I don't get up in the morning.
Mm-mm.
And so you knocked on my door and you were like, hey, and I was like, what? And you like showed me your hand and I didn't see. I was like,
you didn't
what?
have your glasses on. You had just opened your eyes. And I was like, Will proposed.
And I just went, what?
You were like, okay. I was like, I just was laughing and I left your room and closed the door.
You were like, go to bed. And I was like, okay.
Don't worry, I'll tell you later.
I laid back down for maybe like 2 minutes. And then I was like, I need to get up.
Yeah, your brain like pinged you and was like, go out there. It's probably important.
And that's also the night that Anne and me tackled you on the couch, hugging you. And you are not a fan of grand gestures of affection.
Not even a little bit.
But no, it's just great because we invite our friends and family. And so it's like we kind of have 2 Thanksgivings.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say we decorate, I don't mean balloons.
No. No, it is the thing that Will hates the most about being married to me, I think, is decorating for Lord of the Rings every year.
Yeah. You guys hang, well, Will hangs.
Yeah.
I've helped him the last couple of years, but he hangs Christmas lights and tulle from the ceilings, and we throw leaves and like flowers into the like netting. and we build a spider web in the corner, and we have a
Shelob.
giant Shelob. I made a Smaug.
You did make a Smaug.
And he's pretty big. Like, it's
he's
not...
good, too. He always sits on the table, and then you made the Eye of Sauron.
None of this photographs well. We will put pictures, but I'm just telling you, it looks so much better in person. I made the Eye of Sauron. It is so tall. I made it out of a wardrobe box.
Yep. It's very cool, though. I would say it is probably the coolest one that you've made so far.
The Eye of Sauron?
Yeah.
I've threatened for 3 years to make Lothlorien, and I have a better game plan this year, because I tried last year.
3 weeks still. You're good.
Yeah. I tried last year, and I went too big.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've got a different game plan.
So the biggest problem is that we don't have space to, like, store these decorations in the in-between, and then we are running out of space to display them all in the day.
Mm-hmm.
But
because I because I have a mannequin from college, and I only now realized I never took the Galadriel stuff off of her from last year.
She's been Galadriel all year,
and she has the Thranduil crown that I made, and you do all kinds of like intricate food too. Like, it's not just like hot dogs. Like, you make like themed stuff.
Yeah.
And
I still have not finalized the menu for this year, and usually I do it in like September, but I'm having a hard time thinking of something this year. And so one of my jokes has been, I was like, you know what? On the first one, Will and I just ordered Chinese food and then ate pints of Ben and Jerry's. And I was like, you hoes are in for a treat if that's what I end up doing.
Oh, I wouldn't hate that at all.
No, I know. I'm not going to. I'm going to make Pop-Tarts for breakfast for sure.
No, I said I wouldn't hate that.
No, I know.
Oh, okay.
But I'm going to make Pop-Tarts for breakfast for sure. And I think I'm going to make a rabbit stew and serve it inside an acorn squash.
Okay. And then when's the Chinese food coming?
Friday night.
I want 2 quarts of Singapore Mayfun.
That's so much.
I actually found out it freezes really well.
Okay, Anne.
So, yeah, but I'm saying I'm going to get some. So now when I have my like...
You'll get some, and then you'll just heat it up and eat your own Singapore Mayfun during.
Also, so many Funko Pops, and I got
we do have the Gandalf and the Balrog.
Yeah, and I got the Arwen and Aragorn coronation set from my grandmother.
Yeah.
So we have the Barbies and stuff. Oh, it's fun. So we're dorks.
We got a lot of good stuff. Hey, whatever. It's the best day of the year.
The best day of the year.
It's one of the best days of the year. Oh, and we start drinking at like 9 a.m.
Well, I make what's called a bourbon milk punch, which is sort of like eggnog, but without the eggs. And it's amazing. And you can put it in coffee. Or you can just drink it straight with your Pop-Tarts, which I'm going to make, I think, a fig Pop-Tart and then like an apricot and cardamom Pop-Tart.
I actually was going to suggest or possibly even offer to make like ham and Swiss croissants.
Ooh.
I've been making them.
I was going to make those. This is not important for the podcast. Everyone's just going to be like, well, I want that food. I was going to make those ham and egg and cheese Hawaiian rolls that I made last year.
Okay. Yeah, no, do that.
Okay.
So okay. Well, stay tuned for pictures that are not nearly as impressive as it looks in person.
Correct. But still fun.
Watch Lord of the Rings. Turn on the TV. It's probably on right now.
That's true. They do start playing the fuck out of it in November. So, like, just shoot on TNT, like, almost any day.
And one of these days, I need to see the third Hobbit movie, even though you don't like it. I'll
watch it with you. It's just bad.
For completion's sake.
Yeah, it's just bad.
All right.
Well, like he said, watch Lord of the Rings wherever you want. It's not on Netflix anymore. None of them. They all 3 went away. But find it somewhere or go out and get the extended cut Blu-rays because they're amazing.
Yeah, and we watch the extended cuts.
We do, yes. It takes all day. We start at 9:30 in the morning and it takes, I essentially make the Hobbit meals. So breakfast, second breakfast, 11sies, afternoon tea, supper, dinner, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, all of it. But yeah, you can follow us on Twitter at So I'm Watching, Instagram at So I'm Watching This Show. We are also on Facebook and Tumblr, So I'm Watching This Show. I suspect there's going to be a handful of Enya songs on the Spotify playlist.
but none of the ones from The Lord of the Rings.
But none of the ones from Lord of the Rings. That's fair. Sail away.
What's the potato thing?
Oh,
mash them,
boil them, mash them, stick them in a stew.
stick 'em in a stew, right? Okay.
So okay, don't worry. That early video meme and they're taking the hobbits to Isengard. Those will both be in the show notes. So
Okay.
We'll do that. And then other than that, just rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes or wherever you listen. And that's it for us.
Cool. Bye.
Bye.
And then right after the Sam Frodo suckfest, right before the credits roll, Sam fucking flat out bricks in Frodo's mouth.